Welcome, everybody. My name is Tommy Soares, and welcome to another episode of the Pathfinder program. I am Assistant Director of the Purdue Institute of Inflammation, Immunology and Infectious Disease. And today I have the pleasure of welcoming Dr. Andrew Kusmierczyk, and he is the Director of Scientific Writing at PTC Therapeutics. Welcome, Andrew. Thank you so much for taking time to talk to us today. I am super curious to hear your story, and it's really great to meet you for the first time today. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Tommy. Thank you for having me. This is a real pleasure to be here. I think you have a wonderful program. I've gotten a chance to watch some of the other interviewees, and I think it's wonderful that you give scientists the opportunity to share information with individuals that may not be able to, get it otherwise through other channels. I think getting it from the horse's mouth sometimes is the best way to go about getting valuable information, especially as it may pertain to individuals thinking about industry careers.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for that feedback. It means a lot to me. And to know that you've watched some of the shows, so you know a little bit what it's all about. And in essence, we're really trying to just show the different journeys that scientists take in their careers and show what it really takes to succeed in these fields and perhaps in industry. And I was so intrigued by looking at your background and looking at some of your journey. And I hope that you can take us back and tell us a little bit of how you got started in science and, how you've progressed now into scientific writing after quite a journey along the way. So please take us back if you can.
Sure. So you're absolutely right. I think journey is the perfect word for it, because where you start off, more often than not, is not where you're going to end up. And looking back, I would never have imagined that this is the position that I would be in, or the career path that I would be on currently. So, I've always had an interest in science as far back as I can remember. My 10-year-old and I were talking the other day about what are some of our interests. He's super interested in dinosaurs, and I told him at his age I was super interested in astronomy, that I had read every book that my local library had about, astronomy, what I could understand anyway at the time. So, I was always fascinated by science. As I progressed through school in my formative years, I think I started gravitating towards the biological sciences. And after graduating from high school, I enrolled at Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario, as a biochemistry major. And the reason I chose biochemistry is not because I knew what it was, because I didn't. In high school, they didn't really teach you biochemistry. They taught you, biology, physics, and chemistry. And I thought to myself, well, I like biology and I like chemistry. So, why not pick biochemistry? Because I naively thought this was sort of the best of both worlds, Yeah. And I think perhaps like many undergraduate students starting off in the life sciences, I thought I was medical school bound. And I think some of that is because you don't know anything different, right? And you see this also at other points in your career. You think you may be bound for a certain career. As a good example of that may be as a PhD student, you may think that you're on the academic track. And that's what you want, but it may turn out that really that's not what you end up wanting at the end of the day, and you choose a different way. So that was already the case, as an undergraduate. I thought medical school was where I was headed until I took an undergraduate research opportunity the summer between my junior and senior year at Queen's University, where I got to work in a lab and do actual research, and that blew my mind. And I canceled my plans for the MCAT. I signed up for the GREs, and I knew after that summer that, I wanted to do bench research, or at least that is where my passions now lay. So after graduating from Queen's University, I enrolled at Brown University in Rhode Island in the molecular cell biology and biochemistry department there to do my PhD. And again, this was one of those what I thought I wanted at the time versus what I ended up doing. Initially, I thought I wanted to pursue cancer research, and maybe again that was partly inspired by what you learned a lot about as an undergraduate when you learn sort of the basics of molecular biology. You learn about RAS pathway and kind of rudimentary things that have to do with the cell cycle. So obviously you think, okay, what's related to that? Well, cancer. So maybe become a cancer researcher. So unfortunately, the lab I wanted to start my first rotation in did not have any slots my first semester. So I kind of chose a different lab, a pure protein biochemistry lab, molecular chaperones. And I actually fell in love with molecular chaperones. And then so cancer biology was out the window. And I decided to stay in molecular chaperones lab. And that was the focus of my PhD. And I finished up at Brown University, and I moved on to Yale University for my postdoctoral work, and that was in protein degradation. So I continued the theme of protein quality control, moving from molecular chaperones to the proteasome. And I also should point out that wasn't a straight line either, because the first lab that I had accepted a position in as a postdoc was in a different area. It was in vesicle fusion. And that position ended up falling through. The person that ran the laboratory decided that they weren't going to be able to take me on after all. And so that led to some scrambling, and I ended up at Yale. So again, it's sort of the theme of my life. It seems to be, it's not always the path you think you're going to be on where you end up. But it turned out to be great because I loved the laboratory that I was in. I was in the lab of Dr. Hochstrasser, and it was a fabulous time. I would say scientifically, it was the most rewarding time. When you're a postdoc, honestly, I hope if there are postdocs in the audience or watching this, that this is how you feel, that this is the time where you get all the pleasure of science without the administrative pain of running a lab and of having to, shovel money into your research program. And that's why I thought, those 7 years that I spent in that lab were fantastic, because I could focus and my other postdocs on the research and not have to worry about all that other stuff. So that was fabulous. After my postdoctoral years, I accepted a faculty position at IUPUI in the biology department. So my wife and I and our daughter moved to Indiana. That was in 2010. And I ran a small lab, primarily graduate student driven and our undergraduate students. So it was definitely a change of pace from a large postdoc heavy experience to a small grad student driven lab. And I certainly enjoyed being a faculty member. It was a good 8 years that I spent in the biology department. But I knew at some point that I wanted to transition because I personally became a little disillusioned with the grant hamster wheel. I just felt that the amount of time that I was putting in chasing grants and did not really align with what I thought I was getting out of it professionally, benefit-wise. And so I already started thinking about making an exit. And that was actually precipitated for me by the fact that I was not awarded tenure in the biology department. So, I kind of had hoped to leave after receiving tenure, but, things happened differently once again. and I transitioned from academia to industry. I started off at Cardinal Health in regulatory sciences. I spent 4 years there as a regulatory scientist and a consultant. So as a consultant, our function was to help pharmaceutical companies with their regulatory submissions. And this past year, I was recruited to join PTC Therapeutics as an associate director of scientific writing. So it is still very much regulatory science focused, but one of the great aspects of the company that I work for now is since it is not a giant pharma like a Pfizer, we are still growing. There are opportunities for me to pursue other types of scientific communication beyond regulatory science. So I'm hoping to be able to expand that aspect of my career as well. So, but I have enjoyed the transition to industry. I've enjoyed the 4.5 years that I've spent in it since leaving academia, and I'm quite happy where I am. And that has sort of been my trajectory. Hopefully, that take too much time explaining there.
Fantastic. I think it's great. It's really good, and you really took us through a lot of great stuff that I'm hoping we can also touch on a little bit deeper, so that the audience can, maybe understand what you were going through at that time, and for many people to understand that a lot of the things that you spoke about, we all go through, or a lot of us have gone through. And in terms of like the first one, you didn't know necessarily which field to go into or which direction to take, and you knew you liked biology, you knew you liked chemistry, you decided to combine them both, but it seemed like your trajectory towards cancer, your trajectory towards chaperones, that was, well, this is exciting, and you're excited about science in general. I can tell, because I am too. But so tell us a little bit about what has been the advantage of being able to work not only in so many different labs, so many different places, because I'm sure Providence, Rhode Island is very different than your lab in Yale, very different than the lab in Indianapolis, and so on. And I wonder if you could tell us what was that experience like? Was it very different at all these places? And how did you adapt, or how did you benefit from those differences?
Sure. Yes, the answer is there are differences, and each of the experiences had its own pluses and minuses. But I think the overarching benefit of that is it gives you experience to draw upon, so that when you are faced with new or unexpected situations going further, you have more personal experience that you can draw on. The greater the repertoire of the situations you can put yourself into or find yourself in, whether intentionally or not, will benefit you in giving you the ability to draw on those experiences to solve problems, or to figure out what it is that you should or may want to do next. So I think that is the beauty of diversity. I know that's a big buzzword, and I certainly do appreciate, and maybe it's an easy example how diversity of individuals can contribute to a greater whole in terms of problem-solving ability, efficiency of function, these types of aspects, but also diversity of your own experiences. So not just extrinsic diversity. So that's what I mean by, say, diversity of individuals that make up teams, let's say, but your own intrinsic diversity of the experiences that you had. So I think the greater the variety of those, the easier it is for you to make connections later on and help your brain figure things out. I grew up in Canada, but I was not born in Canada. I was actually born in Poland. So my family immigrated to Canada when I was 8 years old. So an easy example of that is just learning a new language. Yes. So those of us that speak more than one language can attest to this. You can sometimes find yourself thinking in one language or thinking in the other language, and those two can be very different. The way you may understand a sentence or a phrase in one language is completely different when you translate it into the other language. And so, and similarly, when you hear someone speak who is not a native English speaker, because I know this experience, I can often figure out faster what they're trying to say because my brain knows exactly what they're trying to translate from their home language into English, So having experience, you already know, okay, I know this is what they're getting at because their brain is making this translation right now. And this is what they mean, even if the words don't, aren't the way a native English speaker would say it. So that's an example of, a different experience, but helps your brain process, right? And you're able to get to a solution faster.
Absolutely. And it's so important that you mentioned that, because you really have to think in a different way. You have to think in a parallel way, but also the importance of communication and the importance of being able to be an effective communicator at every step of the way. Isn't that what they teach us when they teach us here? Give a seminar on your work. How do you communicate your scientific findings to the broader audience of scientists and the lay audience as well? So, I totally agree with you. And I bet you it's probably even difficult if you do speak Polish. It's difficult to talk about science and scientific, technical science in Polish.
Absolutely.
It's almost impossible.
So, when I try to explain to my parents what I would do, it would be sort of this switching from Polish to taking the English words and trying to give a Polish pronunciation to them.
I can appreciate that so much, but it's great to also talk about the diversity of the different places, your different experiences, the different cultures that have given and enriched your horizon. Let's say working with different people. Were there any mentors in your life so far that you could think, oh, really? And you did mention, I forgot the name of the professor. Was it in Yale?
Yeah, Mark Hochstrasser.
Yes, tell us a little bit about some of these mentors like him, and what lessons did he get?
So Mark Hochstrasser was great because he let you really drive your own research interests. So yes, it still had to fit in with the theme and align with the interest, especially from a grant writing point of view. I mean, that's pretty obvious. But in terms of what really interests you and how you want to tackle that, he gave plenty of leeway. And I think that is important because I see that in how you approach being a parent. You want to give your kids room to figure things out on their own, right? So it's sort of this similar idea as sometimes you may hear the idea of who your scientific father or your grandfather was, or for female scientists, your scientific mother or grandmother, your postdoc advisor and your graduate advisor. It's sort of the same idea as a scientific father. His interest is in developing good scientists, and you do that by letting people figure things out for themselves. Obviously, guiding you and asking you the right questions, so you really start thinking about things you may not have thought of, but giving you the independence to do it. So I really appreciated that. I also learned how to write well from him, because he there's no fluff. There's no big words that show how smart you are, and you can write a word with 5 or 6 syllables or anything. No, it's distinct, clear, concise sentences that take the reader from point A to point B by the hand, exactly where you want them to go, so that there's no room for them to come to any other conclusion other than where you're trying to lead them. And that was so important, just seeing my writing evolve from seeing his writing. I certainly learned a lot from him in that regard.
That I really like that point. Number one, the aspect of him giving you enough lead, as you said. There was a prof that once told me, I'm an advisor. I'm not your boss. I'm here to advise you, but it's your project. And I kind of took it the same way as you're explaining it, as they give you enough rope and you do with it as you want. You can really take it. And then this aspect of, again, being succinct in your writing, being direct. I was having a discussion with a reporter, and he was complaining about how scientists don't know how to write, but because we don't write for entertainment, we really write to tell the facts and only the facts, so that there's no misconstrued, attention somewhere else. This is a very important topic now, as we are, in an age where information is coming to us in so many different directions. It's available in so many different places. Did you see some of that as you were training, also the changes that were coming, and did that give you a little bit of interest in becoming a better writer? Or what was it that inspired you? And maybe it was him, but what was it that inspired you to now start looking into your own heart, for lack of a better term, into your own head and saying, I really like doing this writing piece?
Yeah, I those of us of a certain age, shall we say, will remember the life before internet. Okay, so I remember as an undergraduate when we first got email and lining up at the library to go check your email, right? Because you didn't have it yet, and your ability to do that in your dorm room yet.
At the telnet terminal at the library, yes.
So and then you have kids standing in line to the terminal. So that's kind of what you did between classes. So that was kind of funny when you think about that. And then you go from that, which was really only, if you think about it, 25 years ago, mid 90s, to where we are now. The explosion of technology and what it can do has been so great, that the importance of communication has really come to the forefront, because you need to be able to not just know who your audience is, and your audience is changing, because it's no longer just an audience of the written word as it was before, and it's no longer an audience of just email communication or of web communication. Now your audience is web 2.0 and 3.0, and being able to understand these other platforms and maybe use them for your advantage as well. So who your audience is, how to reach them, how to gain their interest and maintain their interest, and get your ideas across clearly. Those are all important skills, and those are all skills that can be learned. So I'm not, that's the fortunate part, is it's not something that, well, you're either born with it or you're not, because that's not true. Those are skills anyone can learn, but you do have to put effort into learning them and refining them. But I guess that's really true of anything, right? Anything that's worth doing is worth doing well, and if you're going to do it well, you have to practice. That's all there is to it.
That's it. That's exactly right. It's the practice part that I think it takes, and it takes courage to get in there and just put it down and walk away from it, and then come back to it and see it again and say, "This is nonsense. Let me write this again," or whatever. I
And,
mean,
and there's no better way to do it than just do it. One of the great things about starting off as a beginning faculty member, when you teach your first class and you get back your first evaluations, that was fantastic. I mean,
yeah.
Kids are honest, and that was awesome because you saw what was working and you saw what was not working, and you can either course correct and figure out how to deliver it better or not. And hopefully, you practice and you seek help if you need it. There are resources that can help you with your presentation skills, whether they're written or oral. So seek those out. Have people that are better than you listen to you, or watch you communicate and learn. So but just do it, because that's the only way you're going to get better, is if you go out and do it.
And one that I learned recently, which I don't think I've practiced as much, otherwise I probably do better in these interviews, is record yourself. Record yourself, and
Sure.
then turn away from the screen and just listen to your voice, and then listen how you're delivering, listen to your punctuation, listen to your accent, all the ums and the things that we provide in between when we're thinking, so that you can actually hear where you're missing some of it, and then do the same thing, but turn off the volume, put yourself on mute, and just look at the video of you and your body language and your expression as you're giving your presentation. I thought, oh my gosh, I if I did that, I cringe when I listen to my voice. But I thought that this is probably a good method. Have you tried some of those, or have you experienced some of those techniques?
So I have not video recorded myself. I have used the audio recordings of my lectures and listened to those to try to work on things such as ums and ahs, which I still do. I can't stamp it out completely, but I think I'm a lot better than I used to be. So that's something that I'm aware of and continue to
You're
work.
you're great. You're great. It sounds awesome,
But
Andrew.
yeah, but
Yeah.
that's what you got to do. I think if I had one of these, earlier, then I could have recorded myself sooner. So that's another wonderful advent of technology, is you have a movie studio in the palm of your hand, really, and you can certainly record yourself and look for exactly what you say, things that you can work on and improve your speaking effectiveness.
No doubt, no doubt. And the technology is just getting better and better. I wonder, Andrew, if you could take us back. I am certain that there are people in the audience, or people that watch this program, that have had this conundrum of, do I stick it out in academia and become a prof, or do I pursue an industry career? And it's this type of decision that really has inspired me to continue to pursue this program the way that I have, because I know you are an example of somebody who's done them both. And perhaps you can tell us about lessons learned of the experience in pursuing both. You talked about the grant cycle and the frustrations with that, and and being at the mercy of somebody else to be productive in your career and this and that. What would you say to somebody who is thinking, well, I might just go be faculty, I might just go pursue that and see if I can get tenure. And we'll unpack the other piece of, okay, now you didn't get tenure, but we got to move on, and what do we do? But can you take us back to that? You were thinking about, okay, I'm going to continue my career, I'm going to continue my trajectory into academia. What were your considerations then, and what have you learned now that you would say to somebody, okay, here are some things to consider if you want to pursue that?
Okay. Yeah, certainly. So when I was a postdoc, I for sure knew that academia was my first choice. So the first thing that doesn't mean I didn't have a plan B. And so that was the first bit of advice that I would give to anyone is think of a plan B. It doesn't mean that you're going to need to rely on it. Things may work out, but at least have one. When I would write letters of recommendation or agree to write letters of recommendation for my students going to medical school, and I had a lot of those because I taught, third year biochemistry, so I had all the pre-meds in my class. And I insisted on when I wrote a letter that they come into my office and we have like a half an hour chat and we talk about their trajectory and what they want out of life. And one of my first questions was, okay, what's your plan B if medical school doesn't work out? And a considerable number of students had no clue. It's just something they've never thought of. And I said, I'm not saying this because I don't think you're going to get into medical school. I'm not trying to signal that you're a bad student. I just want you to think of what your fallback is. And so you may have a first choice. And if academia is your first choice, as it was mine, then do what you need to do to get into, to follow the academic trajectory. Work hard, read as much as you can, apply for as many postdoctoral grant opportunities as you can, check all the boxes, publish in good journals, do all the things that you need to make yourself the type of candidate that a university would want to hire. And those things are pretty easy to figure out. You can talk to people and see what they expect. And you can look at profiles of assistant professors at any university. The wonderful thing, again, about the internet now that wasn't around 25 years ago is I could go to any department, pick out an assistant professor, and sometimes they even post their CVs online already. So you can look that up. But even if it's not there, it's pretty easy to piece through with a PubMed search. And you can see, okay, where did they do their postdoctoral work? How did they publish? You could look up what kind of grants they got with Google searches. And it gives you an idea of what is the profile of a successful candidate for an academic position, and try to make yourself fit that mold and really put all your efforts into that. And that's true with anything. If you're going to decide that you want to leave academia and pursue an industry path, fabulous. Put all your energy and effort into figuring out what gives you the best chance of success in getting to that career. So that's the first thing that I would say, the first bit of advice. The second bit of advice I would say is that be prepared for the fact that your best might not get you what you want through not necessarily a fault of your own. Okay, you may fail, not because you failed, but because some other extenuating circumstances just did not allow you to get to that point where you wanted to go, or you hope to end up. And the best analogy I can think of that is if you I always like to imagine, people always say the harder you work, the more successful you'll become. So the more effort you put in towards getting an academic position, the more likely it is that you'll get an academic position. Or the more effort you'll put into getting tenure, the more likely it is to get tenure. And that is absolutely true. So you can imagine a linear relationship of effort versus success, whatever you want on the y-axis. Okay, linear relationship. But the mistake that people make in this type of thinking is that they mistakenly think that that line crosses through the origin, and it doesn't. Okay, the line doesn't start at 0, 0 and goes up. That line intersects the y-axis somewhere, and that y-intercept is what you don't have control over. Okay, so you can start off and have that y-intercept be high, so that if you're already starting off high, you put in effort, and you may get to past that threshold, whatever that horizontal line is. You cross that and you reach whatever success you wish. But if your y-intercept is negative, you could put in all the effort you want, and you may never reach that line, that your success threshold line, because you already start below. And that you can't, whatever that is that you can't control. You get sick, and you have some kind of medical condition prevents you from putting in the effort that you want to put in. Whatever you cannot control. You write a grant that 20 years ago would have been funded, because 20 years ago the funding situation was a lot different than it is today. How is that your fault? It's not your fault that the government funds science at a certain level. I mean, yes, you can vote, but at the end of the day, those are bigger machinations that are maybe beyond your control. So just be aware that yes, effort is directly correlated to success, but that success line does not go through the origin, and there's things you can't control, and be okay with that. If that's the case, so would be it. Have that attitude that it's okay, that there are things that you can't control. So that's what I would say. I mean, it's the same thing. You may also have the most stellar CV, and the fact of the matter is, so does everyone else vying for that faculty position. And there's just not enough of them going around. It's not your fault. You're not less worthy of a candidate because you didn't get that faculty job. It's just, it's that y-intercept. Something about that other candidate. Maybe they fit what the department was looking for a bit better than your research. I don't know. So it's sort of the intangibles that you just won't be able to control.
Sure. There's so many things that we can control, right? Like we have seed, we have soil, we have water. We can control how much, we can control how deep we plant them, but here comes the weather. And you gotta be at the mercy of the weather, and so you don't know if what you're planting is going to grow or not, or if it's right. That is so interesting, and it must have been a exciting time, but also difficult time in that. It seems like there was some frustration also with the grant writing, and coming from a lab or coming from a place where you were really honing in on your writing skills, and it seems like that could also be a source of frustration. What, if you think back, are there things that you wish you would have done differently, that you think, oh, if I would have done this, or if I would have done more of that, less of this, I think I could have been in a better standing? Have you reflected on that? And we don't need to go there if you don't want to.
So that's like the good and bad, the Monday morning quarterbacking, right? You look back and on the one hand, it's very important to do because you learn very important lessons. On the other hand, it's also easy to go down the rabbit hole and end up in, self-pity or what have you. Okay. So yes, think back to things and take the lessons that you could have taken. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. I mean, if I look back at my career trajectory, if I had to do it all over again and, rewind tape, would I have done things different? Yes, I think I would have. I would have ensured that either my graduate study or my postdoc would have involved structural biology. I would have done some aspect, either that or some omics platform. Because from my experience, if I look at what types of research and grants were getting funded, it was the ability to, say, combine structural biology or omics with pure biochemistry. If you could do that, that's like golden ticket. Okay.
Yeah.
And if I could rewind the clock, I probably would have done that. And I think then that would have put me in a better position, because then I would have been able to marry the biochemistry, which is my passion, the actual wet work, with things that funding agencies were looking for, looking to put it in the context of either a big picture with omics approaches, or put it in a structure context where you can directly link structure function relationships and show things that you see in the lab are that way because this is what the molecule looks like. Okay, that's very powerful. But at the time, when you're starting out, you don't know these things, and no one kind of tells you these things, and so you follow what your interests are, and there's nothing wrong with that. I followed my passions and became a gel jockey, right? And I think I took it as far as I could with the resources I had. Academically, it didn't work out for me in the end, but so be it. That's fine. But I'm not going to look at that and say I failed because I didn't do structural biology, because I had so many experiences and things along the way that did go right, that did turn out. If I hadn't gone to Brown and done that and instead gone somewhere with a more heavy structural biology focus, I wouldn't have met my wife, who I met at Brown, which means I wouldn't have the family I have now, and my kids, who mean more to me than really anything else. So
yeah, absolutely, and it's so.
To me, it was a win, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's important for the audience to hear that, and to hear that loud and clear, because there's really no wrong choice. There's no failure. And this is just the adventure in life, and it's just the journey that takes you from here to there. Sometimes there is wins, sometimes there are no wins, sometimes there's disappointment, sometimes there's a lot of joy and elation. I want to go back now, if you can, to what it was about Cardinal Health and writing and the regulatory piece. What did you do there? What was your function, and how is it that you got so close into doing some of that technical writing for regulatory? Explain what that is.
Sure. So, when one thinks of pharmaceutical industry, and especially students or postdocs, they probably think of the science part of it, which is the obvious part, right? I mean, the product of the pharmaceutical industry is ultimately a medicine, which is nothing more than a chemical, small or large. So that is that aspect. But in order to get that drug approved and be able to sell it, market it, there's a whole slew of things that have to happen off the bench. And these things have to not happen, but have to happen correctly. And so the regulatory piece is being able to take the development of that molecule and communicate it to a regulatory body, who ultimately has to decide whether or not there is enough evidence to grant a marketing authorization or a license or not. So that is preparing what is called a dossier. for the FDA, or in Europe, the EMA, to review. And that contains all the components, the clinical work, so the actual results of all the clinical trials, the non-clinical work, so everything that goes into research aspect before you actually go into the clinics, all the toxicology, the pharmacokinetics and the pharmacodynamics and all that, to the aspect that I'm in, which is CMC, or chemistry, manufacturing, and control, which is the actual synthesis and production of this medicine, and ensuring that it is produced with sufficient, so that it has sufficient strength, efficacy, purity, all the things that the FDA specifically calls out that must be present, must be a characteristic of that medicine to be able to market it. So not only do you have to, have that piece, but then that actually has to be then written up, in a dossier that gets electronically transmitted to the FDA. So that's the part that I'm working on right now, which is helping, because I'm no longer a consultant, I now work for a pharmaceutical company. So it is helping my company prepare these submissions to health authorities around the world. But as a consultant, I would be helping companies do that, for whatever reason. Not all pharmaceutical companies have large enough regulatory staffs that that they have that expertise on board, so they rely on contractors essentially to help fill those needs. So
how interesting.
That's what I did at Cardinal Health, and that's what I continue to do at PTC is help compile these dossiers that regulatory bodies then use to make their decision to whether to approve a drug or not.
And so in these dossiers, are you essentially reporting out results from different trials, different experiments, and in your case would be the manufacturing process? And is the rigor imposed by you, or is the rigor imposed by the FDA when you write these things?
Sure. Good question. So the answer to that is both. Yes, it is the data aspect, so presenting the data, but not just the data itself, but presenting the entire manufacturing history and the development, and how the company decided to produce the drug in this way, and what was the rationale for producing the drug in this way, and what are all the critical parameters that the company is going to use to monitor production of the drug to ensure that that drug is produced consistently to the same parameters, so that you get reproducibility, so that your first batch looks like your next batch looks like the umpteenth batch down the line. So you present all of that. That also has to fit in with a strategy piece. So yes, regulatory agencies like the FDA put out guidances to industry for how you should do different aspects of drug development. Sometimes those things are pretty clear and spelled out, like these are the parameters that we expect you to test for, and these are kind of the results that we expect you to get.
Okay.
Sometimes things are vague, and they are intentionally vague because, for example, it may be a new area like gene therapy, for example. That is something that is still quite new relative to small molecule drugs, right? So the 20th century was the century of the small molecule. I would say the 21st century is going to be the century of big molecules. So we're talking about your antibody drugs, your monoclonals, and also your cell and gene therapies, the advanced therapies. And the fact of the matter is that the industry doesn't have 100+ years of history to go on, whereby the FDA can come up with clear guidelines. So what the FDA will do is come up with a framework based on what their experts consider to be the most important parameters that need to be kept in mind, or to use the language of regulatory, to be controlled, okay? And then it is kind of up to industry to say within, how do you interpret those guidelines? And so I may interpret them a certain way, someone else may interpret them a different way, right? Because after all, it's not black or white. But what you have to do is, if you're going to choose to interpret them this way, then this is the evidence that we are going to present to show why our interpretation is good, and why our interpretation will lead to a product that reduces risk. And that's actually something very important to remember. It's not the FDA's job to approve as something as safe, in the sense that guarantee that it will not cause harm, right? The FDA's job, and the job of any regulator, is to mitigate risk and to reduce risk. You will hardly ever be able to reduce that to zero, but that's where risk-benefit analyses come into play, right? I mean, all drugs have side effects, and whenever you take a side effect, chemotherapy, it's not risk-free, but for a lot of individuals, the benefit outweighs the risk. So of course, the decision is made to approve those drugs, even though they are literally poisons, correct? Yeah. So that is what the job is for the company to come up with a strategy piece to be able to say, these are the reasons why we think what we are presenting will result in a favorable risk-benefit analysis and ultimately bring benefit to the patient. So, and the FDA may either agree with you or not. And if they do not, there is a back and forth process where you can request meetings with the FDA to ask for advice or feedback, and to come to a mutually agreed understanding on what your dossier will look like, so that it has the best chance of being accepted by the regulatory body. So that's kind of in a nutshell of what really regulatory is. It's, yes, there's a big part of filling out the documents and presenting the data, but there's a huge element of strategy in the sense of being able to tell a coherent story to the regulatory body and try to convince them that what you're presenting should be accepted.
Yeah, that's so interesting that it is a bit of a, you got to convince them that what you've done is good due diligence for it. Andrew, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit, if somebody were interested in becoming a technical writer, to work in industry, what are some of the things that they should be doing now as they're, in school? Is there a way to build up your portfolio other than the publications that you're doing, or is that even important? What are some of the aspects that you would be looking for in a new writer?
So when I joined Cardinal Health, I was fortunate enough to join a company or a unit within the company, because Cardinal Health is a huge conglomerate. It's a $130 billion revenue company, and the regulatory component was, very small fraction. There were 200 of us in that regulatory group, about approximately, in a company that's 40, 50,000 employees. But the individuals in leadership positions in the regulatory piece were more interested in hiring people with an aptitude to want to learn. They weren't necessarily only hiring for experience, because one of the things about industry in general, I would say, is that it can be difficult to get your first position. Once you get your foot in the door, then it's a lot easier to move from company to company, but landing that first position is difficult. And that was the case for me as well. And a lot of companies would not want to hire me because I did not have experience in regulatory. And so, but Cardinal Health was not like that, because their philosophy was, you will learn as long as you have the aptitude to learn. If you're a self-starter, if you're willing to read guidances on your own time and, look at for other resources. For example, the Regulatory Affairs Professional Society, you can join that society as a member, and they have online resources through their knowledge library that you can just start reading to learn about regulatory, any aspect of regulatory you want. They have a certification program that you can go through and learn a credential. It's called the RAC or RAC, and that shows that you have passed you need to pass an exam to receive this certification. And they generally want you to sit for this exam after you've had a couple of years in the industry, but there's nothing that says you can't order the materials, and there are regulatory textbooks you could read. The thing about that is regulations change. So, I wouldn't expect to just use books for your learning. You always have to stay abreast of what's happening. So following guidances, those are all governments publish them online, so you can go ahead and read those. There are places that offer degrees in regulatory science. Are they necessary? I mean, they certainly won't hurt. A master's in regulatory sciences may take 1 or 2 years and certainly give you a foundation of knowledge that you could use, but they're not a substitute for actually going in and doing the work, which a lot of it you learn on the job. And that was really true of myself. I went into regulatory really not knowing a huge amount about it, but I learned pretty much what I needed on the job, and I'm still learning. There's so much in regulatory that I don't think the learning ever stops. And so as long as you're an individual that enjoys continually learning, then you'll be fine. Because you will most of what you need on the job.
Are there resources like dossiers that have been approved that you can get your hands on and start looking at what is the type of material, what's the type of language?
So all universities have tech transfer offices. And so you may be able to either look through the websites of those offices, if not at your own university, then at others. And some will have, for example, sample dossiers, because those companies that are university-based that need to submit INDs, investigational new drug applications, in order to be able to run a clinical trial. If there's maybe a faculty member that is starting up their own company and they're thinking of moving something from the lab to the clinic, they will need to write a IND. And so you may be able to find those and see what they look like. That's actually what I ended up doing starting out, is going over to Stanford, Washington University in St. Louis, some of these other schools like Northeastern that actually offer degrees in regulatory science. I think one of the California schools, I'm not sure if it's USC or UCSD, also has a regulatory program. They'll have resources online that you can look and see what those entail. I will say that a background in chemistry certainly helps, because a lot of laboratory science, especially in the CMC space, chemistry, manufacturing, and control, is still old school purification. With obviously with modern twists, but you still need to understand chromatography columns and how they work, what can go wrong, why you run them a certain way and not another way. Those are all things that are helpful, because if you're going to be going through a regulatory method and you have to write out system suitability or assay acceptance, it kind of helps if you know kind of what they're talking about here, so you're not completely blind to it. So a degree in science helps. It doesn't have to be chemistry, but if you've had chemistry background where you've done chemical analyses, that will certainly help.
Awesome, just awesome. I thank you so much for the guidance, and thank you so much for that particular cue, because I would not have thought to go to our Office of Technology and Commercialization to start to learn about some of that. And I think it's important. It's a great resource that people should use. I want to thank you, Dr. Andrew Kusmierczyk, Associate Director of CMC Technical Writing at PTC Therapeutics. Thank you so much for taking time to tell us about your journey and sharing so much with us, taking us deep and personal. And I thank you for opening some of your life to us and letting us learn through you. So thanks again.
My pleasure. I've really enjoyed it. This was great. And if any of your audience members or individuals watching this later have questions, you can find me on LinkedIn and contact me through there. I'd be happy to answer questions you may have additionally. So thank you very much. This was fabulous.
Thank you so much. And thanks again for providing that contact information. I'm sure we'll cross paths again and we'll catch up with you soon. Thank you. Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.